Anywhere in the world, there is no test for egg quality. So even if your numbers are lesser, that does not mean your quality is necessarily bad.
What is the right age for women to have children?
So if you want to have 2 children and you don't want IVF, your first child should be by the age of 27.
What is the difference between PCOD and PCOS?
50, 60, 70% women may have period pains. But does everyone miss work, school, lie in bed for 3 nights, is not able to go to work? Is it debilitating enough? I think endometriosis is a dreaded disease and it's, in my opinion, far worse than having cancer.
Can single people opt for surrogacy if there's a single father, if there's a single mother?
So if a man wants to be a single father, he can't. But if a woman wants to be a single mother, she can.
This is the second segment of our podcast, which we are continuing from the male fertility episode. We have again Dr. Rajeev Agarwal talking about female infertility, especially problems with PCOD and endometriosis and other fibroid problems that women face. Dr. Rajeev Agarwal is an IVF specialist himself, and he's also a fertility specialist. I think all the women out there watching this episode, you will get great value for content in this episode. And this is something that I think all women from 20 to 40 need to watch. And if you're watching this episode, please do subscribe. We call these amazing doctors, and we love for you to hit that subscribe button and also the bell icon so that you guys can get notifications when we put content for you out there. Dr. Rajeev, welcome to the second segment of our podcast, which is on female infertility. And I think this is what most of my listeners have been waiting for, because when we think of infertility, sadly, we think of women more than men. I think that's the truth of it. But again, just diving into the first question, what is the most common cause of infertility for women?
Ovulatory dysfunction would be the most common, meaning women who don't ovulate or release their eggs very well would be primarily the ones who have difficulty conceiving. Of course, the second commonest is women who have their tubes blocked for whatever reason. It is egg numbers and quality. So there is a huge and sharp declining in both the numbers of the eggs as well as the quality of the eggs. And that's what we see in our clinics most often these days.
If I was a young female, what are the tests I should go for to check my fertility status?
So if you talk about pure fertility, what am I worried about? I'm worried about my egg numbers. So ovarian reserve, as we call it. So there is a blood test called blood for AMH, or anti-Mullerian hormone. Can be done any point of time in the cycle. Does not require an empty stomach to be done. You can just walk into a lab and get that blood test done. That's one. 2, we can actually do a vaginal scan on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th day of periods, and we can actually count the number of eggs you have, what is called as an antral follicle count. The combination of this blood test and the antral follicle count are brilliant in talking about your ovarian reserve. So that's eggs. The second you require is a uterus. So you do a vaginal ultrasound again, understand the uterus is more or less all right. The third thing you would require is an open fallopian tube. So there are certain tests which are designed to test if the fallopian tubes are open or not. Of course, that's not something one would do when one is not even trying to get pregnant. As a preconception test, it's usually not done because it's invasive. But for women, what is also important along with this is certain hormonal tests, because they do contribute to infertility. Thyroid problems, prolactin problems. So these kind of hormonal issues should also be tested for.
And these tests that you just mentioned, I mean, like AMH and all these tests, they measure the quantity of eggs that you have. I mean, would they also measure quality?
Very good point. They only and only measure quantity. Unfortunately, other than having eggs in our hand during IVF, fertilizing them, making embryos out of them, and ultimately achieving a pregnancy wherein you look back and say, the egg quality must have been good. There is no single test for egg quality as such.
Right. I mean, that's a very good point for all the listeners out there, that practically in India, there aren't a lot of tests for egg quality, but there is for egg quantity.
Anywhere in the world, there is no test for egg quality. So even if your numbers are lesser, that does not mean your quality is necessarily bad.
I've asked this for men, but I'm going to ask this for women also. Is that what is the right age for women to have children? Like, what is the time when they are the most fertile?
So as mothers and grandmothers said, before the age of 30, please get married and have children. Unfortunately, the saying is true. But to put it into perspective, there was a very, very interesting, and I think that's the only study done across the world. I think in Netherlands, they took about 10,000 women and said, what is the right time to get pregnant? So depending on whether you want one child or two children, whether you want it naturally only, or whether you're open to IVF, they came up with an algorithm which said, when should you have a child? So if you want to have two children and you don't want IVF, your first child should be by the age of 27. If you want to have two, if you want to have only one, then by 32 you can start.
Right.
If you're open to doing an IVF and you want two children, by the age of 31, you should be having your first IVF. If you're open to IVF and you want only one child, you can wait till the age of 35.
Because we are living in a modern world where, people don't even want to get married before 35 now. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not saying in all areas, but like in urban pockets, and as the world is getting more liberalized, people want to get married at 35. I mean, it just doesn't make sense in terms of family. And I know that globally, the fertility rate is decreasing in general, apart from certain sects in certain countries. So I feel like, how the population is going to crash. But do you feel like because of this rise in infertility, I mean, like the populations will really crash that high?
I do feel that is going to happen, and people will have to depend more and more on treatments, IVFs. I do have a lot of couples who come in and, the argument they give is people are getting pregnant. It's not that beyond 35 people are not getting pregnant naturally, proving what I've just said as wrong. They can have two children as well. But when you're talking about a generalization, which is going to affect positively or negatively a big, huge population, then numbers have to come in.
Right.
And I always tell people that if you want something in life, you should be willing to give something else. So if you're going to push your fertility to a later age, you must be open to the prospect that you could and possibly require some treatment.
There was some news recently, I think 6 months back or 1 year, at least that's when I saw it, that there are these fancy companies coming nowadays, like these fancy tech companies who can make babies inside a metal chamber. I mean, do you think that's even practical?
So till now we've got donor eggs and stuff like that, but we haven't really been able to outsource surrogacy into a machine that we put a baby inside there, take the baby out after 9 months and just kind of deliver it. Yet, yes, the technology exists and is working. So it's been tried for animals and it's been tried for very small babies. But of course, because of ethical issues, it's been banned across the world, I'm sorry. Probably if in secretive, it must be going on somewhere. But people were very close to breakthrough.
Right. But far from now, at least.
Far from now.
I mean, maybe when we are in a crisis, I guess.
Yes.
If we are going through an apocalypse, maybe. But coming back to my questions, what is the difference between PCOD and PCOS?
So PCOD is an earlier term. It's polycystic ovarian disease. It was considered a disease earlier, and that is why it's been given up. The new term is PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is more a conglomeration of certain symptoms that a woman might have, which defines her to have this particular problem.
And how does that affect fertility for women?
It affects every particular system of a body. So women with PCOS will have weight gain, can have weight gain, not necessarily everyone. They will have ovulatory problems. That means they won't ovulate very well. They won't release their eggs very well. The quality of those eggs may not be very good. They may have miscarriage issues because of certain hormonal problems which they may have within them. They have glucose intolerance. They're not frankly diabetic, but they also have pre-diabetic conditions. Later on in life, they can have lipid problems, thyroid problems, prolactin problems, all of which coming together to cause infertility.
Right. And again, a very commonly asked question by a lot of women in our public is the question of endometriosis and infertility. I mean, what are your views on that?
I think endometriosis is a dreaded disease, and it's, in my opinion, far worse than having cancer.
So what is exactly endometriosis?
So endometriosis is when the lining of the womb, instead of coming out through the menstrual cycle, turn back and travels through the fallopian tubes and falls inside the tummy, This is the most simplistic way I can make you understand. Unfortunately, we don't know why endometriosis happens. This is one of the theories. So when it starts to fall inside the tummy, it starts to grow there. So at a point during the periods when the woman is bleeding, that ectopic tissue which was there inside her tummy also bleeds. And because of the bleeding, it causes pain, it causes the organs to get stuck together, and consequently infertility. What is bad is that it's progressive. What is bad is that it's recurrent. What is bad is that there is no permanent cure.
So, I mean, that just sounds horrible.
It is horrible.
So, is it so difficult to manage also through medicine, or can it be managed?
The average time to diagnosing endometriosis is 7 to 10 years.
Wow.
So imagine
since it starts.
Because the gold standard for diagnosing endometriosis in its early stages is putting a telescope through your belly button. So how many girls, adolescent girls, do you think would be suffering from painful periods? How many women do you think would be suffering from painful periods? Almost 50, 60, 70% probably. A lot many of them would secretly be harboring endometriosis. And there'll be someone who'll be telling them, don't worry, period pain is normal.
Right. I have another question on this. I mean, do you think there is a breakthrough technology or a breakthrough diagnostic test that women can sort of use to find out if they might have endometriosis? Because, you know, a lot of women, like especially the teens and when they start menstruating, I mean, they might have period pains. And is there some kind of test that they can get done to sort of check?
There is no test, but one needs to be aware of how to pick it up. So say, for example, I said 50, 60, 70% women may have period pains. But does everyone miss work, school, lie in bed for 3 nights, is not able to go to work? Is it debilitating enough? So mild period pain is normal for women. But when it starts to disrupt your life, that's when you need to wake up and say, there's something wrong. This is not normal.
Right.
That needs to be investigated. So something like that. Then there are tests like doing an MRI, doing an ultrasound, doing a blood for CA125. So there are certain tests designed which the doctor can very easily work out, which can somewhat point in that direction. Sometimes we even actually have to treat it. So say, for example, a woman comes with very painful periods and you say, okay, I think this is endometriosis. Let me treat it with the way I would treat endometriosis, and she becomes better. And then you calculate backward and say, because I treated her in a certain way and she became better, I think she has endometriosis.
Right. That's a very good advice.
Yes.
But for all the women who are listening to this, I mean, I think it's great advice. If you have period pains and that is hampering your mental health, your physical health, your day-to-day activities, please go visit a professional gynecologist and please show yourself. I think this would really help. I mean, the whole community in general. But, you know, again, there's another question to another disease, which is fibroids. And what are your views on fibroids and infertility? Is that as common as endometriosis?
Fibroids are again very common in women because it's estrogen hormone dependent. Many women have it. Fibroids are nothing but non-cancerous tumors of the uterus. Luckily, fortunately, most fibroids are small. And the dictum for fibroids is, if it's not disturbing you, please don't disturb the fibroids. Fibroids again can be in various positions of the uterus. 90% of the positions of the uterus do not cause a problem with the day-to-day life or with fertility. So only in very specific areas can it cause you a problem, but they still need to be identified and monitored.
But if someone is paranoid, would you recommend removing them surgically?
No. Not unless there are... If you have a 10 centimeter fibroid, yes, you should be paranoid about it. Get it removed. But there are, as I said, in majority of the cases, small little fibroids, don't do anything to them.
Right. And it's something that people can live with.
Absolutely.
Okay. I want to move on to, a more lifestyle form of infertility for women. A question that so many people ask. Okay, so what happens if you have fibroids then?
It depends on the size and the position of the fibroids. They can cause you heavier periods if they're inside of the uterus. They can cause you extremely painful periods, again, if they're inside of the uterus. They can cause you miscarriages if there's a big fibroid sitting on the uterus and there is no place for the pregnancy to grow. Similarly, because of its size or position, it can cause you infertility as well. Sometimes it does not cause anything else, but the size. Say, for example, fibroids increase during pregnancy because of the increased blood supply. So you had a fibroid which was 4 centimeter when you got pregnant, became 10 centimeters in a couple of months. So, and your tummy is anyways filled up by the growing uterus with now the 10 centimeter fibroid sitting on top of it.
Right.
Can cause you discomfort, can press the surrounding structures and cause problems with your kidneys, your digestion and stuff like that.
So, but if a woman gets it removed, they don't have any harm to the uterus in that case?
Not really, but some women have. I've removed, I think, a maximum of 18 fibroids from one woman.
18 fibroids?
18 fibroids from one person. So not much is left of the uterus at the end of it.
Right.
But yes, majority cases, nothing happens.
Right. I now want to move on to the more lifestyle aspect of infertility, because there's so many women who ask questions which are very similar to men, but I just want to address them specifically and differently. Because again, the question comes from diet. Like, is there a specific diet that women should follow or something that is different from men?
No, I don't think it is very different from men. But yes, a high protein diet works more for women than for men. We spoke about, when we spoke about the men, that fat is also required for sperm production. So probably a protein and fat rich diet would work for men. For women, it's more of a very high protein diet for egg development and for fertility.
But do you think that a lot of women who come to you, do you think they get sufficient amount of protein in their daily diet?
80% of the women in the country are protein deficient. They do not get sufficient protein from their sources.
Is there a specific supplement that you would recommend for protein in case they're not getting, in case they're vegetarians, in case they're not getting it from their diet?
So plant protein supplements are much better because whey protein is there, but it tends to cause, lactose intolerance, those kind of problems. So plant protein is always a safer, more easily digestible form of taking protein.
Right. Because, we were also talking about how heat affects male infertility, right? Does the same thing happen to women also? Does heat impact them in any way?
Well, honestly, there aren't as many robust studies on heat and women as there are for men. Probably it does. But again, women are not known to work in such heated environments like a furnace and stuff like that, which is why probably there aren't so many robust studies.
Right. Because another question on lifestyle that came up in our research a lot was sleep. I mean, again, I would assume that this is the same for men and women?
Absolutely the same for men and women. Women who are working night shifts tend to have more fertility issues as compared to those who work day shifts.
But do you think stress affects women differently in terms of fertility than men? Or is it, again,
it would be the same, but of course the manifestations become different. For example, you have a girl who's studying for exams. Very often you'll find that girl delaying her periods. Because of the extreme stress that she underwent during the exams, the periods got delayed. So we give injections to women for IVF. If there is a bereavement in the family, if there is something else which goes wrong. So I particularly remember a donor, egg donor. We were stimulating her ovaries for giving the eggs to someone else. And all her parameters were brilliant. The ovarian response from the injections was absolutely terrible. And we just couldn't find a reason because her reports were good, the injections were brilliant, and everything worked perfect. We went deeper into her story. She'd gone for a marriage to her village. There someone stole her ATM card and stole the money. So the stress that she underwent during the time of ovarian stimulation for IVF went completely for a toss because of that stress.
What is IVF for women?
IVF, or in vitro fertilization, is simply a means of conceiving for women and men who have difficulty in conceiving for whatever particular reasons. In this, we take the eggs outside the body. We take the sperms from the man. The fertilization of the egg and the sperm happens outside the human body, not in a test tube, but that is why colloquially it's called a test tube baby. Once the embryo is created, this embryo is now put back inside the uterus at a particular time, giving the woman a pregnancy.
Right. And what if that fails also? I mean, can surrogacy also happen in India? Because, there was a whole movie made about it, Mimi, where, they show a foreigner coming to India and becoming a surrogate. What is the current law in India about surrogacy?
So what you mentioned earlier about a foreigner coming to India and getting surrogacy done. That is primarily the reason why surrogacy in India earned a bad name, because there was a lot of commercialization of it. People who probably did not require surrogacy were going into surrogacy, and foreigners were coming into India, getting surrogacy done. And say, for example, unfortunately, the child turned abnormal for whatever reason. The foreigner couple would say, I'm leaving the child behind. I don't want this child, which is not right. Currently, the law states, yes, you can do surrogacy only if you do not have a single child. So someone who has one child earlier cannot undertake surrogacy. Number one. Number two, you can't pay for surrogacy. It has to be altruistic. So you need to have someone who, for love, for charity, relative, for whatever reason, comes forward and say, I will be a surrogate for you.
Right.
And of course, there are laws laid down as to how that surrogate is going to be looked after through insurance, through stuff like that, and her basic needs. And the law again says that once the delivery happens, the surrogate will relinquish her rights to the child, and the child will be given to this couple.
And that surrogate has the ability to withdraw that consent?
No, she can't.
She can't.
She can't.
Like, she has to give the
She
child.
has to. Then again, the government now says, say for example, you walk into my clinic and say, I want to do surrogacy. I can't do it for you unless we file a nomination to the government, an application to the government, stating the reasons why we want to undertake surrogacy. The government has now made a board which sits down, evaluates your reason and condition, and then gives permission to do surrogacy under certain laws and rules. Only once the government gives permission can you undertake surrogacy. Again, not every IVF clinic is allowed to do surrogacy. Only certain ones which have the license to it can do surrogacy.
Right. So it is a complicated process
Yes.
then. It is a complicated process, and there cannot be any commercial transaction in terms of
Absolutely, yes.
a surrogacy. So I just have another question on this before moving on to my rapid fire, is that can single people opt for surrogacy if there's a single father, if there's a single mother who just wants to have a child to, for life fulfillment, and they go to a clinic and say that, I want to have a child. Is that allowed?
Unfortunately, here, the world says that we are partial towards men and women have it hard. Here it's the other way around. So if a man wants to be a single father, he can't. But if a woman wants to be a single mother, she can.
Okay.
Surrogacy again has to come by law. Are you eligible for surrogacy or not? The government is going to decide that.
I have another question on this, which is, can you, as an Indian citizen, go outside the country, adopt someone through surrogacy maybe, and then bring them back to India and get them citizenship?
So very recently, there was a controversy in Punjab. Musawala, who died, and his parents went to Dubai and did something which the Indian law does not allow. It's debatable because there were issued notices. As of now, nothing has happened. But whether you're in India or outside, I feel you're still governed by the Indian laws. And when you're going to bring a child like this into India, you could probably get yourself into trouble.
Right. These are certain questions that came again and again and again. So we've just, narrowed down a few. So I want to ask this like in 30 seconds or less. I-pill and infertility.
I-pill is bad. I-pill is something which is an emergency contraception. You don't want emergencies in your life every other time. It's a very good drug, but don't take emergencies in your life every single day. But otherwise, it does not cause infertility.
Right. I have another question which is very funny, but it came in our research, so I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, can I get pregnant if my husband is infertile?
Yes, the woman can get pregnant if the husband is infertile. For whatever reason, we need to understand. Infertile could mean that his sperm parameters are bad. They can still get pregnant through an IVF. Infertile could mean that the sperms are absent. They can still use a donor sperm.
Okay. The third question is, are phones and laptops bad for fertility for women?
They are. Again, if a woman is going to put a laptop on her tummy all the time while she's pregnant, again, it's going to cause the same kind of problems. Not huge ones, not probably as bad as for men, but definitely even in small amounts, yes.
So now I come to my last question, which is very interesting. Are oral contraceptives bad? And is that linked to PCOD? Because, a lot of PCOD women need to take it. And does that cause infertility?
I think oral contraceptive pills are demonized far more than they deserve. So if you talk about only infertility, after leaving oral contraceptive pills for whatever reason, it's been shown that 85% of the women will conceive within 1 year. But that's exactly the same number of women who will conceive if they weren't taking the oral contraceptive pill. And this is not just one study. The American Association, the European Association, there are plenty of very robust studies which have all said taking oral contraceptive pills and leaving it at some point in time does not increase your risk of infertility. Again, coming to PCOS, I think oral contraceptive pills are not the first line. There are some brilliant things that you can do for women with PCOS to control their problems. But yes, at a certain point, if you do need to give it, it's very good. It does effectively manage PCOS problems quite a lot. And if you're saying that oral contraceptive pills cause infertility, we actually use these pills during or before IVF to enhance fertility for these women. So how does then oral contraceptive pill cause infertility?
Right.
I think judicious use of any medicine is always going to bring benefits. So I think the same applies to oral contraceptive pills as well.
Right. That's a brilliant answer. You don't know how valuable your insights are. I want to call you for more podcasts. I want to have a separate one on surrogacy with you. But Dr. Rajeev, thank you so much for coming. It was a great pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me here. I've been waiting for this for a very long time, and I've been watching your shows grow by leaps and bounds over the last couple of months and years. So it's my honor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, before we end, I'd like to thank our sponsors, DecodeAge. DecodeAge is India's first longevity research company aiming to increase the health span of people. The supplements and tests are based on the latest scientific breakthroughs in the field of longevity and aging sciences. The supplements they provide target the biological mechanisms that cause aging. For example, as we age, the NAD+ levels in our body decline, leading to mitochondrial dysfunction and genomic instability. Two main reasons for biological aging. By supplementing with DecodeAge's NMN, one can replenish the NAD levels in the body and tackle aging at a cellular level. Now, there are numerous clinical trials and experiments indicating that NMN increases the health span of individuals who consume it. I take it myself and it feels great. Apart from NMN, DecodeAge offers other longevity supplements like spermidine, AKG, Fisetin, and transresveratrol. If you want to start your healthy aging journey, then DecodeAge is the place to be. Do visit decodeage.com and use my coupon code Anant to get this.